Thank you for joining us on this next session. We're going to be discussing the future of farming. I'm really excited to welcome our panelists, Tinia Pina, Mary Wetherill, and Nate Littlewood. I'm going to give them an opportunity now to introduce themselves. Tinia, why don't you start?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. My name is Tinia Pina. I'm the founder and CEO of Renewable. At Renewable, we're an agricultural technology company that's created an approach called organic cycling science. And ultimately, that means we take unrecoverable produce waste from food distributors, processors, and manufacturers, and we turn it into organic hydroponic nutrients to make it more water soluble and basically reclaim nutrients that is compatible for soilless farming.
Mary?
Awesome. Thank you, Noah, for having us here. My name is Mary Wetherill. I am the CEO and co-founder of Green Food Solutions. We basically sell, install, and maintain vertical hydroponic equipment. We show residential and commercial property owners and developers how to implement farms and gardens as an amenity specifically. We show farmers around the world different economic models, how they can do the same where they live to really kind of, really bring access to fresh food. Our mission is truly that we believe that it's to empower a new local food system. So our vision is to see every residential building, every commercial building producing freshly harvested, sustainably grown food for its residents or employees. We're kind of supporting farmers right now in a software program that we're developing. We do this both on a commercial scale. Really, we kind of see our vision as our company is supporting whether it's a school, a restaurant, a local urban farmer, really kind of showing them how to start a farm and the economic models, because that's really what we see has been a barrier, kind of breaking down some of those barriers to entry. So our company actually offers free planning and design for people to start farms and gardens. Like if you know your square footage, if you know your square meters of whatever property you have, we'll kind of give you a CAD layout of what you need to grow, show you the costs, the yield, and we do this completely complimentary inside of our commitment to really breaking down barriers to entry for people starting farms.
Awesome. Nate?
Sorry, I had a little connection hiccup there, but my name's Nate. I'm from Urban Leaf. We specialize in apartment and beginner-friendly indoor edible gardening kits. Really, our reason for existing and I guess the foundation of our company is that we believe that the sustainability of our modern food system represents one of, if not the, biggest challenges that our generation faces. And really what our focus is, or our mission, if you will, is to facilitate a relationship that brings people closer to their food. In doing so, we aim to motivate, encourage, and inspire healthier and more sustainable food choices. Our specific niche is, as I said, apartment and beginner-friendly kits that allow you to grow things like microgreens, herbs, fruit, vegetables, a few other bits and pieces. And we really aim to differentiate ourselves based on thoughtfulness of design, affordability, and ease of use.
Love it. All right, let's dig in. One of the first questions I like to ask is, how did you get where you are today? What inspired you to start your company, Tinia?
Yeah, and I didn't do my introduction justice, but I'll try to encapsulate it in this response.
Sure.
So what really personally kind of created the connection or the impetus for Renewable was I started off in finance. I had no technical training in biology or agriculture, but back in 2011, I was a pro bono SAT teacher, which through a prep and pro bono program, we were teaching kids in Harlem with the goal of getting them prepared to do well in their SATs. And so for our Saturday sessions from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m., what the kids were bringing for lunch, I just felt those options were putting them at a disadvantage to others. And it really comes down to the types of food and the nutrition that was within it. A lot of times heavily processed or fried food. So that then made me think around, at the same time, I knew and was involved very heavily in a lot of urban farming and just sustainability, and just realizing as urban areas become more populated, there's going to be a need for more food resiliency and how we're distributing and producing our food, which a lot of the other panelists are working on. And so, how can we incentivize or create more farms to be able to grow organically? And that's going to really be driven on removing what are heavily carbon intensive inputs, such as mineral salts or synthetic fertilizers. So by combining this challenge globally of how do you increase more organic produce supply, and then using food waste as a mechanism to do that in a very affordable, price parity way with conventional fertilizers, that's always been the challenge. We were in R&D for roughly about 7 years. A lot of us already know, renewable had been known in New York City in the sense of, we've been operating, but it took a significant amount of time to really upcycle food waste in a way that was going to be water soluble to a plant in a very sophisticated sterile system, such as a soilless farm using hydroponics. So, in summary, it's like looking at nutrition. How can you increase the nutritional value of food being grown, and using food waste as a mechanism to do that?
Love it. Mary, how did you get started? What inspired you?
There's probably several different layers. So my background is I'm a health professional and is in business. So I've had a wellness center for probably about 20 years. And my business partner and co-founder, Electra Jarvis, her background is in sustainability. So there was actually I had gone to Green Tech just as a participant, just kind of, she was working for a company called Blue Planet at the time. And I kind of saw at that trade show that there were, 6 or 7, maybe 8 types of hydroponics in the market, but like hundreds, if not thousands of different brands emerging. And it really can be confusing. So like what I know in the health and wellness industry is that confuses people and it confuses a market. And when there is such a need, as Tinia was speaking to, about, food security, individual health, igniting food systems in a new way, this was all important to not confuse a market that's clearly new, up and coming. A lot of investors, there's so much buzz around this industry right now. So I just kind of saw an opportunity to really show people, to create a business that could break down some of those barriers to entry and dispel some of that confusion. And then when I speak to the layers of it, throughout our journey, there was one aspect where we, started working in different types of systems, testing different systems, R&D, kind of seeing what was more affordable, what was some of the buzz. And we kind of saw that, we were working in a shipping container program in the beginning of our experience, that, our electricity bill was about $600 a month. So it wasn't a feasible way of growing food. And we were like, okay, this particular program is getting so much buzz. And I was like, this can't be what people are going to invest so much money into. There's got to be an economically feasible way that this works. And at the time, so here are the layers, right? The number one lobbyist group that was fighting against urban agriculture and green roofing and sustainable movements, and that was, ironically, the real estate industry. So we said, let's find a way that can partner with them, show them that this works, not be against them in that way. So let's work with them. Now, obviously in New York, there's the Climate Mobilization Act. So now they are required to do certain actions. But prior to that, we really wanted to make sure that there was a way that it worked for people, and it still works for them. Now that they're required, we probably get more phone calls, but it's just really interesting. And then another side of it was within the amenity model. We were working in a commercial farm. We were renting space as in the beginning portion of our business in a commercial farm in the Bronx that was on top of a affordable housing building. So, here we see that this is a commercial farm. There's people who are living in this building not getting access to the food. So we created a program where we subsidized a portion of the food we were growing there for the people who lived in the building. We were also delivering food to people who lived in New York at that time as well. So it just kind of escalated and grew. And so I just was really inspired about breaking down some barriers, dispelling some of the confusion, and really getting access to people for food in an affordable way. And really just finding the ways that it can work economically in the city.
Love it. Nate, how did you get started?
Yeah, so my entry into the space was via what could best be described as a midlife crisis of sorts a few years back. I'd spent most of my career working in engineering and finance, but was At a point between jobs, I was actually on my way to another financial firm, but kind of took some time out to do some personal reflection and soul searching, and thought to myself, what is this for? Like, why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard to help make rich people richer? And I realized that I was, probably never going to find personal satisfaction and fulfillment in the path that I was on. And kind of stripped everything back, went back to square one, and thought a lot about my childhoods, my passions, hobbies, and interests. And there were basically three areas that kind of came to mind. One was food, which is something I've had a lifelong interest in. I actually did a certificate of culinary arts while I was living in Toronto. The next one was technology. That's because I'm an engineer and a bit of a geek at heart. And the third one was sustainability. And that to me is really about, my happy place. I love spending my, spare time in national parks, outdoors, hiking, biking, that sort of stuff. And I kind of put all these three pieces together. And, if you can think about it like a Venn diagram, the part where these three areas all overlapped for me was looking at ways that technology could be leveraged to find smarter, greener, and more sustainable ways to feed the planet. I went down this path of like learning about food systems, understanding where food came from, and realized that food and agriculture is the number one source globally of land clearing, deforestation, species extinction, fresh water use. It's a leading contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. And, over the course of sort of 6 to 12 months, I kind of developed this thesis or hypothesis like, oh my God, the food system is absolutely screwed. There is no way on earth that we can continue on this current trajectory. Like, something had to change. And I didn't quite know when, or I didn't know how, but I knew that the way that we were going to eat in the future had to be different to how we'd done it historically. And so then I basically kind of built a business around that hypothesis. And Urban Leaf is really an expression of, that view on the world and, how we think things are going to change. And so, we wanted to set something up that was going to be an enabler of that, a facilitator of that. And, essentially what we do now is help people who have no past experience, people who claim to be plant murderers or whatever, like, we help them grow their own food. That's, our core focus. So that's kind of how we came about.
So I think before we dive deeper into what sustainable farming and the future farming look like, we need a definition. So maybe Mary, because you're kind of in the middle between the consumer side of farming and the commercial side, can you give us a definition? Maybe a lot of people have heard, urban agriculture or indoor farming. Can you kind of define what that means for the audience?
I truly do believe that a definition of it is somewhat subjective, but my take on it, I would say, is that a future where everyone has access to fresh, sustainably grown food, every residential building, every school. It could look like farms growing for restaurants, a restaurant growing for themselves. There's a restaurant on West 10th Street that grows all of their food on top of their rooftop. There's tons of different access to where food can be grown. Community gardens, amenities, greenhouses on the top, literally cities that could be flooded with food. I mean, you can envision museums, any institution where cafeterias, where food is served. I mean, that is truly the vision I see for urban farming, is engaging in the unused spaces in every single way. I mean, we have a huge opportunity now with, what we're seeing in real estate, particularly with COVID, to really engage and embrace the urban structures of these beautiful buildings that we have and make them productive in a new way. And a lot of that can be through farms and greening. And there's a really great opportunity cities have right now to repurpose in a sense. And that's kind of a part of what I think urban farming could be as a definition, is kind of seeing this show up in all the unique ways that it always has, in a sense, community gardens. And but when you want to scale that up to a place of like safely produced food, now you're in, there's so many more buildings. We can remember victory gardens in a sense, but that was in a day. Now we have tons of more unused space and rooftop spaces to tap into than that was. And at that time, we were able to produce 50% of our own food. So I really see a vision where cities can produce like such a, if not 100% of their own food. It's pretty extraordinary what I think is possible for cities to produce. And that could look like, new subsidies for urban farming, new, agricultural partnerships with the cities and with city planners and architects building that into their designs. And so there's a whole, it's really just a matter of creativity to what's possible inside of urban farming and what that could look like.
Got it. So, how does what you're working on in a sustainable food system in the future? How is your work?
What's our interpretation of a sustainable farming in the future? Is that what you're saying?
How is your work making that happen? Where do you fit into that?
Yeah, so what we do is we focus on really trying to decarbonize the fertilizer supply chain. So right now, globally, mineral salts or conventional fertilizers contribute to 3% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And so what we focus on, yes, it's been coined as circular economy, but we really ethically kind of move the needle a little bit further on that, because it's relatively easy, I should say, to think of, taking waste or wastewater and making it turn into a viable fertilizer. And people have been doing that for generations in field-grown agriculture. But given the precision needed and the amount of consistency needed in a soilless farm or a hydroponic farm where you're having targeted nutrients being delivered to the roots of the plants, it's a lot more challenging. We try to basically allow for organic hydroponic nutrients to increase the profitability of these farms by anywhere at least 22% to upwards of about 80% in some cases. And then, of course, that depends on the crop being grown. Sorry, we have this unsolicited glow from the sun right now. And we also try to make sure that the farms that we work with, we're showing a lower carbon footprint as a result of using our products, because our fertilizer supply chain or our nutrient supply chain is being sourced from localized waste streams. Third is trying to help the profitability be tied to or held accountable to the nutrient density that our products are allowing for these farms to be able to be shown in the plant tissues of the produce being grown. So those three factors, increasing their profitability, increasing or lowering, I should say, their carbon footprint, and third, increasing the nutritional value of their produce, is how we see sustainable farming. And we're trying to make it as easy as possible for more controlled environment agriculture farms to succeed in doing that.
And who are your biggest customers right now? I'm curious.
Yeah, so we work with a couple of farms. Some of them that's going to have a case studies release in the next 4 weeks. Until then, we've just been holding those pretty tight to our chest. But a lot of them are upstate New York. None of the farms in New York City, just because our manufacturing facility is in upstate. So it's a little bit closer for us to be able to research and see how the product's doing in real time.
Got it. And Nate, for you, we're seeing growing demand in consumers wanting to grow their own food. Have you experienced that on your end? And what's next for Urban Leaf as you kind of branch out and try to provide more opportunities for consumers to grow their own food?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said earlier, like, we founded this company because we believed very, very strongly that people were going to become more interested in growing their own food in the future. What we've seen in 2020 is certainly a very rapid acceleration of that. It turns out that with COVID and everyone stuck at home, kind of bored a lot of the time, anything to do with hobbies, whether it's gardening kits, jigsaw puzzles, or knitting supplies, like, it's been sold out everywhere. So there's been huge demand from people just looking for stuff to do. I think other things that have happened during COVID is that, and you guys can probably just see this in yourselves, is I think people have just become a lot more mindful about their day-to-day, about their relationships, about their habits, what they kind of put into their body, how they eat. Like people were picking up baking. Like you couldn't get yeast anywhere over New York for a period because people were just getting so engaged with food and cooking and stuff. So I think that has been a big part of it. There's certainly an element, as Mary was saying earlier, there's certainly like an element of kind of victory gardens behind this. Like people were freaking out about food supply chains. The supermarket shelves were empty. It's like, oh my God, I need to figure out how to grow this myself because all of a sudden, I can't rely and trust on our food system to deliver me what I need. So if I want to look after my family, I've got to learn how to do this stuff. The combination of all those things has driven, absolutely phenomenal demand in the consumer gardening market this year. Things have been, really strong.
And what's next? Are you releasing a new microgreens kit right now? Are you planning future products as well?
Yeah, so what we're working towards is basically an ecosystem of products that will all kind of fit together a bit like Lego blocks for indoor edible gardening. Now, in the outdoor world, you might be familiar with the concept of square foot gardening, where gardeners kind of divide up their patch into square foot lots and they plant, each one separately. Most people don't have a full square foot inside on the windowsill. So what we're focused on is a third of a square foot. And we're basically building this ecosystem of products that will all fit in like a 12 by 4-inch sort of rectangle, which includes our microgreens, our hydroponic bottle garden kits, our fruit and veggie kits. We have a few other things in the pipeline as well. That is kind of all, based on this idea of making maximum utility out of 1/3 of a square foot. So literally anyone can do it with, as little space as a windowsill. Next year, we'll be looking to roll that into some sort of subscription type product, where over the course of like 6 to 12 months, people could get exposure to the full suite of, gardening experiences, which would include hydroponics, it'll include soil, it'll include herbs, fruit and veg, microgreens. And so there's really, a tremendous amount that you can do with very, very little space. What we're doing right now is kind of putting out all of those individual elements, but what you can expect to see us do next year is kind of tie them all together a little bit more. We're also working on a fair bit of online digital content to supplement all of this stuff as well.
Thank you. Mary, I'm curious, since you have a little bit of a broader overview on what's happening, is the demand for sustainable farming, urban farming, is it more from restaurants? Is it more from retail, from supermarkets? Like, where are these products going that are being grown in these more sustainable ways?
That's a really good question. I think that most, obviously in our experience, we deal mostly with farmers or farming within residential settings. So all of that food goes to the people who live in the building. I think restaurants have been having an impact, obviously, given they've been having a hard time with COVID recently, where we've had an interest, a few cafe owners, things like that have approached us where they're interested in growing their own food for the salads and the sandwiches, burgers and things like that. So there is this interest I'm noticing that has risen the same way as, a lot of our business has been B2B. But there's also this huge B2C, as, Nate is just saying, it's like people are wanting to grow their own food. So whether that's the individual restaurant owner that maybe felt that they didn't have the time before or, the resources, they're interested in that now. And there is, some sort of a reduction of that and interest in that. I see that a lot of that food really depends on what, the business model that you're working in as an urban farmer. Like I was saying, and a lot of what we do is we see that we like food to be just accessible to the people where they work or where they live. So that's kind of something that I find interesting that, urban farmers, I hope that the urban farms in New York particularly aren't struggling right now as a result of that. Where restaurants aren't doing well, because I think now what's happening is there's a big emergence of people growing their own food. So There's a combination that I personally see that emerging in. I see that with people wanting to have their own gardens, hobby farmers. So it's not just, within the urban areas, people are growing on their windowsills, they're growing in their home, but they're also looking to, kind of have hobby farms.
I guess this next question's for you. Sorry.
Again?
I was going to say this next question's for you and Nate, but if you are not done, I don't want to interrupt.
No, I mean, I guess the only thing I would say is in sustainable farming, one of the things that our company is working on right now, we also notice is mushrooms. So as an amenity, as some home growing, actually available on our website now, you can buy like a mushroom growing kit that we're kind of cultivating. There's a DIY version of it, but then there's also like an assembled version that we're kind of like it's fully automated with the sensors, the IoT. We're working on the app. So we've noticed that there's just food in general, whether it's mushrooms, whether it's green leafies, herbs, tomatoes. One of the things that we like about some of the hydroponic equipment we use is that we are able to grow a lot of vine crops. So our clients and customers have really liked the diversity of food options that we can make available versus just the green leafies and the herbs. So there's just been like demand for food, whether, it is kind of interesting just as a business owner to see what is emerging, whether it's B2B, B2C. Right now, there's a lot in both that's kind of emerging.
And Noah, if I could add in something there, one thing that we've seen is a lot more specialized or native species plants, whether it's for ingredients or for medicinal herbs, is starting to be grown. And I think there's going to be certainly a niche within there that a lot of people will pay a premium for to incorporate into new CPG items. So that's something that I see as a resurgent kind of niche market as well.
Got it. So given this shift of consumers wanting to grow their own food, what opportunities are there for entrepreneurs that are interested in getting into the space? Are you seeing gaps that need to be filled, opportunities that are unaddressed? And this is open to anyone.
That was the first one that I've kind of noted. I'm not sure if something else may be noted by Nate and Mary as well.
Whew, yeah, that's a tricky one. Well, yeah, I guess my high level view to this is that, you can make an opportunity anywhere if you kind of go about it the right way. One thing that I'm really interested in, though, is the kind of 20,000 foot view of all this, like the life cycle analysis assessment of all of this stuff we're doing. A lot of the stuff that we're all working on, yeah, sure, I guess, there's certainly like, positive and beneficial elements to it, but there are offsets to all of our businesses. Like, I think it's a very important thing to do to teach people, how to grow their own food. But we are creating a decent carbon footprint in the process of doing that. There's a lot of shipping, there's a lot of plastic, there's packaging, there's this, that has to be, sent around the country. And I think that there's some interesting opportunities to kind of take a step back and like look at all of these different types of food production and different types of business models from a life cycle analysis perspective, which is like understanding all of the inputs to them and really, coming up with some sort of hierarchy and, understanding which ones are doing the most in terms of their impact. It's a complicated problem, but I think it's one that we really need to spend a bit more time on.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts, Mary, on opportunities for entrepreneurs looking to get into urban?
Can you reframe the question again? Can you ask the question again?
I'm curious about what opportunities you're seeing for entrepreneurs entering the space. Like, where is there not enough attention being given?
I see a lot of opportunity for, particularly in urban farming, in the sense of farmers being creative about how that looks. So here we have, obviously we have the traditional model of a commercial farm. You set it up, whether that, there's a lot of debate of whether that works or not. Indoors. I mean, we have huge companies that are, it is not determined what direction they're going in, what they're necessarily, what business they're in. Is it an R&D business? Are they growing food? And that what I'm kind of seeing as an opportunity is to really work out distribution. So the opportunity right now, in my understanding of it, is that everyone is trying to figure out how, it's not so much whether or not there's a market for food, local food, the demand, the inspiration, everything is present. What's not figured out is who's going to buy it. So I think right now in the market, which is one of the reasons we came up with, the amenity model, because we're here to support farmers actually making a living and having these farms. So there are farms emerging that, what do farms do? They sell food. We don't sell food, we sell farms. And the reason why we do that is because, again, this food can be a happy byproduct in urban areas and residents can have fresh food now without having to, and there are economics involved in that we figured out and we work with the developers on, but the economics of the farmer is like, they no longer have that stress of being able to oh, I have to sell my food. And there's a way that they can actually make money from a salary and jobs. And we are that's why we call it a new local food system inside of our mission, because I really see the problem here is that we're on an island in Manhattan, and it makes no sense on one degree to start a farm in the middle of Manhattan and ship the food out to the suburbs. So, but how many people live in Manhattan that want lettuce? And how many restaurants are in business right now during COVID? And so there's this thing where there's got to be unique ways. So your creativity is your biggest barrier or your biggest asset right now. As an urban farmer, you get to say okay, what are the creative things I can do? Everyone's tapping into unused space. How are you going to do it? How are you going to create that way that it's groundbreaking, because there's so much opportunity right now to get fresh food in the city. It's just, what's your mission? Do you want to do a traditional farming route? Do you want to come up with something new? But the creativity will be what excels you or limits you.
No, I do have one other example of a niche or a market that I think there's a lot of opportunity for. So to the credit of East New York Farms, located here in Brooklyn, I cannot remember the name of this nonprofit farm, the gentleman that was the executive director, but they were growing a indigenous plant that was, I think, unique to Jamaica or another Caribbean country. But the community was really behind purchasing this specific herb because it was helping them reduce their blood cholesterol. And that was a prevalent symptom and impact to the community because they had a lot of constituents that suffered from that. So I think, the main premise there is there's certainly a need for culturally relevant, production of food that is incorporated in CPG goods. More farms are actually growing and cultivating for that. And I haven't seen that widely done yet. I'd be curious to see if Nate and Mary has also seen the same.
Actually, the great point, Tinia, there's a client we're working with that is looking inside of that, where, they grow ingredients. It's kind of like a whole world of nutraceuticals, so there's a whole way of embracing farming in an urban setting that works economically that may not look traditionally as it used to.
There's certainly an interesting diversity angle or thread to all this. I can't remember the exact statistic, and forgive me, I'm probably going to misquote this a little bit, but it's something like, 5 ingredients make up 75 or 80% of the food in your average supermarket. Your corn, wheat, soy, etc. And when you look at the sort of supply chains for those things, they're incredibly consolidated. And COVID has taught us that, our supply chains can also be quite fragile. It doesn't take much to, disrupt some of these big sources of supply. And kind of looking forward into a world where we have to think about climate change and, vast areas of some of these crops are just going to cease to become productive in, where they're grown now. And I think a really important thread to all this is kind of diversity of food systems. We need different types of plants growing in different areas if we want to continue to feed ourselves. It's that simple. There's really no other alternative to it. I think that's kind of linked into some of the things that Tinia and Mary were saying just now. But diversity is hugely important.
Great. My question now is, what role does technology play in your business? Are we talking about a future of smart farms, both in your business, Tinia and Nate? Is there an opportunity for technology to help make this sustainable farming future a reality?
And I'll speak from the standpoint of 2 respects. So one is production within essentially a food waste processing facility, and then production at the actual farm. So for us at our facility, it's all about resource efficiency. We're proud to say that everything going in, there's zero outputs or zero waste going out. So we really have a place for all types of resources that we take in and we process. At the farm, however, what hasn't been released that we've been working really hard on is what is called an on-site food waste recovery system. So think of like your large tomato greenhouses where they have sometimes on average 28 to 40 tons per hectare of just tomato waste, largely vines, or sometimes the tomatoes itself just aren't sellable. And unfortunately, if it can't be diverted for food consumption by animals or people, it's oftentimes just thrown out. So there's water sensor technology to make sure that the water that we ultimately process during, trying to reclaim as much nutrients from that farm as possible, while at that farm, we can turn it into potable water for reuse. The second thing is, being able to create biostimulants for the farm to be able to reuse. And that also in turn kind of increases the self-sufficiency of the farm. That's where we kind of use in technology to its greatest use. That's probably most applicable here.
Great.
Yeah, I think technology is kind of a double-edged sword. There's certainly a place for it, and it's certainly important, I think, for commercial farming operations. It helps you, really optimize yield and output and productivity, which are all super important. Another sort of snippet or insight I had a few years ago, there's a guy named Dixon Despommier up at Columbia University who's kind of one of the pioneers of, indoor and vertical farming. And I recall a study he did a while back where he said that even if like every single rooftop in all of New York City was covered in farms, you'd produce like 2% of the city's calorific needs. So look, it's hugely important, and New York's a bit of an anomaly, let's admit. I mean, it's incredibly high population density relative to roof space, but urban farming, like these are all super, super important things, and I'm behind all of them. I think we should, put them everywhere we can. But there's definitely a limit to how far we can go with providing our population's calorific needs with this sort of operation. We are quite unapologetically anti-technology in our approach to gardening and food. Really, we don't want there to be much technology between, the consumer and the food, because really what we're all about is helping people establish that connection. We don't want technology in the way of that. Like, I want the consumer interacting with the food so that they kind of learn more about it, understand it better. Now, let's be honest, like, me helping someone grow a basil plant on their windowsill, we're not going to save the world that way. Like, it's, barely even a rounding error in terms of global food production. But the kind of theory of change that we're really interested in is the kind of indirect benefit and impact that you can get from that. And there's a huge amount of research out there that shows that people who are more engaged with their food, whether it's through gardening or whether it's through cooking, they're statistically far more likely to make healthy and intelligent food choices. One particular study, I can't recall the author, but I can send it to you later if you want. It found that kids at this school who had been engaged with growing leafy greens were 400% more likely to want to eat healthy greens, leafy greens at lunchtime. So kind of take that observation and say, okay, well, if I can help someone grow, the garnish for their salad or their pizza or whatever on Saturday night, and they can understand that experience and what it looked like, how is their food choice behavior actually going to differ next time they walk into a supermarket? They're going to look at this packet on the shelf and go, I know where my dinner came from last night because I had some input in actually growing it. But like, what is this stuff? Like, where did this stuff come from? Is it really a good idea to eat this stuff? And that I think is, the really powerful sort of change that we can have here. So for us, we're a bit anti-technology, I would have to say, in that we're, quite deliberately wanting to foster that connection between people and the growing of their food.
So you're activating mindfulness.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Mary?
I think that's the most leverage that we can possibly have in terms of, changing food and changing food systems is just getting people to think about it differently.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely second that about getting people to think about it differently, for sure. We're kind of, when it comes to technology, Green Food Solutions is probably a middle path based company inside of that, where a lot of what we've trained people or talk about is how, just to kind of be a little weary of how people go very too high tech, in our opinion, like I was saying, in over engineering things in a sense, with, for example, some of the shipping containers we've worked in our experience, where, there are, methods of plumbing, when you're thinking hydroponics, that have existed for, forever, and gravity pressure and things that, you don't need to necessarily have all these pumps and like that, so that there's a lot you can tap into, and there's many systems that support that, and just using sort of a middle path technology base, where I love the technology of hydroponics because of how it recycles water, but you don't necessarily have to go, overboard. That being said, absolutely on a commercial scale, creating that data and efficiency for food security is probably the most important thing right now. Obviously everyone knows in the industry that, farmers hardly write anything down. And so it's very, it's an industry with very little data collected. And in order for, our practices and on a larger scale for what we need in the world, absolutely we need to manage that on a commercial scale. But there's also a belief that we engage that for even the general user in their home, what we've noticed with some of the amenity models is that to even gauge the interest in a customer or an individual, sometimes it is the technology that's going to have them interested in gardening and like that. So like in one of our amenity buildings, they have an app. So we use a hydroponic system that, you can actually have the app, and from your apartment, you're hanging out, you can look at your garden on the rooftop or the basement, wherever your garden is in your building, it's pretty cool. So, and it's like, it's convenience farming, right? So it's like what we provide is this cutting edge solution for, people who, in urban settings, that they're busy. So it's like whether you want to or you don't want to, you can always have this garden, but you don't actually have to tend to it. But that each week your farmer is going to actually have that food, in a refrigerator on site for you. So there's these cool things that technology truly provide in the people receiving their food, how they get their food, how they engage in the growing of that food. They meet their farmers. So there is a really great balance that we find between, using, basic, I guess it's like, physics of plumbing, like gravity and gravity tanks and things like that. But then also using technology where it does serve a purpose and it's not over-engineered, but it actually is functional. Whether that's the collecting of the data or serving the customer to engage their interest in growing food, in the example of the amenity. We're currently working on ways, a software program to show farmers how to do what we do here in New York City in cities around the world. We're working with farmers in Tokyo right now, in Kenya, and like we've done some mentorship programs in Puerto Rico, where, really kind of showing other people, wow, there's a lot of residential buildings, there's a lot of development happening, Denver, all this, right? Where imagine every single residential building or a new development had a farm built into that plan, that the architecture, the architects were like actually incorporating that into the design in some way. So imagine if you had every urban farmer in every city kind of fighting for that and propelling that forward. Well, we believe our software can really help make that happen and get these economic models way faster than we could ever on our own. So, and it empowers other people doing the same. So, technology can be powerful and empowering, but you really have to know its limits.
Before we go to question, I'm curious, do you have any resources to share for anyone who's interested in learning more about urban farming, sustainable farming, to check out?
What to check? Well, we have an upcoming training. November 13 is a virtual training, and indoor farm. So we're going to do actually it's Manhattan's first farm, vertical farm as an amenity. So our company Green Food Solutions set that up. It's on the Upper West Side. Come check out the tour of it, as well as learn how to run a farm from your seeding, your transplanting, your harvesting. So that's November 13th, greenfoodsolutions.com/events. If you are interested in joining, that's something we know about. Otherwise, I'm too busy. I hardly know about anything going on these days.
And no, I'm trying to keep it as relevant to the audience as possible. But if you're just remotely interested to what all of us do, the New York City Agriculture Collective has an online conference that they're hosting. I believe it starts October 23rd. So that's coming up. And then there is a globe, I think it's the Association for Vertical Farming, or it could be a different one. And this is, I'll have to give the link to you afterwards, Noah, but they are just talking about the intricacies of a lot of the systems that were introduced during the panel today. So I can send that to you afterwards.
Great.
Actually, also, if anyone wants another event we're doing ourselves, shameless plug, but in February in a greenhouse in southern New Jersey, if anyone wants to see a newly erected greenhouse that we did as a project, we're showing farmers how to select your greenhouses. This is a lot of hobby farming. These farmers are commercial farmers, but if you're interested in learning about from different greenhouse developers that will be there, that will be in February, also available on our website, but that's particular to greenhouse production.
Anything, Nate?
No, not a lot extra for me. I would just say that a big part of my foray and introduction to this industry was the AgTech Week that Tinia mentioned just now. I did that a few years back, went to every single event, met as many people as I could. And honestly, that's how I got introduced to most of the people that I now know in this industry, was through that event. So I'd recommend that.
Awesome. All right, we have a question here for Tinia. What was the biggest challenge your group had to solve while developing the process to recycle food waste?
A lot. Thank you for the question. So think of compost tea, right? We say more sophisticated in that because you have to make sure that a lot of the compounds, and just to keep it as super high level as possible, is what farms look for, which is water soluble. So as soon as they apply the product into their system, the plants are going to be able to take it in as plant food. And with anything natural or biological, you don't have the same microbial makeup or synergies that you would in a soil environment that accelerates that for you. So it was that. The other challenge was, okay, you're dealing with a supply chain of food waste, and that food waste characterization could be variable based on the day that you receive it and based on your suppliers. So we're very controlled with the suppliers that we partner with, which helped resolve that and gave us security of the food waste supply chain. But third, COVID hit, and honestly, we had to completely change our production process as it first stood. So we had something completely designed by February 27th. And then COVID impacted us because a bank loan was completely rescinded, and had to completely redesign our manufacturing process in order to still survive 6 months later. So that was challenging. And so, it's not that it can't be done. There's certainly barriers in dealing with food waste, but it certainly took a number of years just to perfect it and to create a consistent product.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions?
We promise not to bite.
I don't see any right now. Let me check in the chat. All right, I guess to sum it up, if each of you could share an obstacle that you overcame in your founder experience in building your business that you can share, and how you overcame it, just to stay on par with the entrepreneurship theme. Maybe Tinia, can you start?
Yeah, happy to. Food waste, I feel like, didn't become really sexy from a headline and media perspective until the last maybe 3 years, maybe slightly more or less. So it was finding a team that had the wherewithal to kind of stay with our mission, right? And so how I kind of navigated that was, oftentimes I would work with people as a contractor or an advisor first, and really suss out the relationship. Are they doing this for the same reasons and mission commitment that I originally designed it for, or are they doing this for an appeal that is not really, innate to what we're doing and wasn't really for them, but they were doing it for the sex appeal of it. So that's kind of helped out in terms of team formation for us.
Great. Mary?
It's funny because when you think about the challenges in business, I would say that the challenge that my co-founder and I probably experienced in this business is So in navigating if to take on investors. So we bootstrapped from the beginning of our experience. And what we did, and we still are, we have not to this day taken on any investors. We are open to that in the sense that we have very specific goals of what we would use that money for. And we're pretty frugal about what we would even need to take money for in that way. So I think being focused, knowing precisely what you want to cause. I think, Tinia, you hit it on the head. Keep your team on track. Keep yourself on track. A lot of that has to do with building your own confidence as a leader, as knowing yourself as a leader if you don't experience yourself as a leader. And that has a lot to do with, I think, the challenges in yourself, in your team building, and any decision you make, going forward. So I think that our biggest challenges were just kind of being able to make those choices personally about what to do financially or not to do financially. And I think we really navigated them in the sense that we haven't had to take on any, investment. And, so far so good with that. So, I mean, and obviously many companies do take on investment, and that's not the point. It's just that, trust yourself in your journey, because that is the challenging point for us. It was whether to do that or not. And I think that's, and our choice was really based on, okay, we need to keep our goal in mind, and a lot of, where that money was coming from would probably have taken us off track. So, just keep yourself focused and remember what you're committed to. And keep knowing you can do it, because it's really building up your team, building up your self-confidence, and just that is truly like seeing what you're serving, putting that goal in front of the I don't want to's and like that. Yeah.
Thanks. And Nate?
Yeah, wow. Challenges and problems, that's kind of like every single day that we encounter them. I mean, we're designing and developing products, and so like every day there's some issue of how we're going to procure something, how we're going to assemble it, how we're going to distribute it, do the unit economics make sense, like and I love that stuff. Like I kind of, if I were to summarize what I enjoy doing and what I think I'm good at, it's creative problem solving. And I'm kind of in my element with problems being dealt to me every day. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind in the world of entrepreneurship. Not to kind of be a copycat here, but these two ladies, we've also had our fair share of problems with focus early on. And I think this is always going to happen when you get a bunch of, intelligent, ambitious change makers in the same room. Like everyone's going to have a million ideas. And we would have times where we would get together. It's like, okay, we should upgrade that product. Oh, we should change the packaging over there. No, let's release this. Oh, hang on, let's go find some investors. Like we're just all over the place. And like every week it was a different freaking, evacuation procedure, and we'd be going in a different direction. The turning point for us when we went from kind of just chugging along to like exponential growth was probably when we stumbled across a management system called OKRs, or Objectives and Key Results, which were kind of pioneered by a guy named Andy Grove from Intel. It essentially involves like setting one singular organizational priority, coming up with a few ways of tracking that, and then linking everyone else in the organization to those previously agreed goals. And we use that model quite religiously, have done for a couple of years now. We have an advisory board. They're not directors, but we kind of treat it like a board of director meeting, where we say, okay, this is what we're working on for the next 3 months. These are our priorities. These are the targets we're going to aim to hit. And then every month we get back together with those guys and report on our progress towards those targets. And I don't like being made look like a fool. So, it's a good way by forcing ourselves to kind of come back to this advisory board and report to them on the progress we've made and how we're going to these targets is been an incredibly powerful way for us to stay on track. There's actually a book called Radical Focus, which I would highly recommend to anyone working in a small business who is struggling with this sort of stuff. Only takes a few hours to read, but yeah, it changed our business more than any other experience I think I've had.
Thank you for sharing. Nate, Mary, and Tinia, thank you so much for a great conversation. Really appreciate you joining us at the Venturepreneur Summit, and hope to have you back in the future.
Thank you, Noah.
Thanks, Noah. Appreciate it. Take care.
I'll see you backstage.